Welcome, everyone. We want to let a few folks get into our Zoom webinar, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar, Collaboration for High Quality School Mental Health Services, with our presenters, Miranda Zahn and Lisa Sanderson. This webinar is co-sponsored by the Great Lakes MHTTC and SAMHSA. The Great Lakes ATTC, MHTTC, and PTTC are funded by SAMHSA under the following cooperative agreements. The opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services and SAMHSA. The MHTTC network believes that words matter and uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. For more upcoming events and information, please follow the Great Lakes MHTTC on social media or visit our website. I want to thank you again for joining us and share a few housekeeping items. Technical issues, if you're having them, please individually message Alyssa Kuala or Rebecca Buller in the chat section, and we will be happy to assist you. Questions for the speaker, please put any of those questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get them answered. If captions or live transcript would be helpful, please use your Zoom toolbar to enable by going into the More section, select Captions, and Show Captions. At the end of this session, you will be automatically redirected to a very brief survey. Certificates of attendance will be sent out via email to all who attended the full session. Please allow up to 2 weeks for that to process. We will email you the presentation slides and handout following the presentation. The recording and presentation materials will also be available on the Great Lakes MHTTC website within a week following the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Miranda Zahn is an assistant professor of school psychology at the University of South Dakota. She conducts research, training, and technical assistance in school-based mental health services. Specifically, Miranda focuses on social justice and the role of teachers in school supports for youth mental health. In addition, Miranda is a school psychologist and a school mental health provider at Nebraska's Educational Service Unit Number 1, where she provides direct services to youth as well as training and systems consultation to schools. Lisa Sanderson has served as a project director for the statewide Family to Family Health Information Center at South Dakota Parent Connection since 2008, also home to the state's OSEP-funded Parent Training and Information Center. She has worked with systems and families across South Dakota for over 25 years, serves as USD faculty for the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities program, and is the CDC's ACT Early Ambassador to South Dakota from 2018 to 2024. Lisa has a Bachelor of Science degree, maintains licensure by the South Dakota Board of Social Work Examiners, and was certified educator for many years. Lisa is a parent and a grandparent of children with exceptional needs. And now I'll turn things over to them.
Okay, I'm going to pull up my slides. Hopefully you all can see them now. I want to, as we start, express gratitude to all of you for taking the time to join us today, being invested in partnering with families in your school-based roles. I imagine we'll find out about your roles in a second. As we get started, I know that Rebecca gave us excellent introductions, but I just want to say that I'm grateful to be here, and let Lisa say hello as well.
Well, I want to echo what Miranda said. Thank you very much for being here, for being interested in the topic of how do we partner with families for best outcomes for kids. And I want to thank Miranda, who actually I met and worked with on the LEN program, the USD LEN program. We are both LEN faculty, for inviting me in, and the opportunity to visit with all of you, and hopefully share information, as well as refer you to some resources that might be helpful in the very important work that you do.
Yeah. Hopefully our session today and the partnership between Lisa and I as we present can serve as sort of that model of the partnership that we hope you all can use in your practice. It was important to me in joining with MHTTC today that we not speak about parents without parents here, without someone who represents that parent perspective and parent voice. So I hope that is something that you all take seriously. As we get started, we're hoping to learn a little bit about those folks who are in the audience. Again, we're glad that you're here. We appreciate that you have joined us, and we know that there could be a whole wide range of folks here. We'd love to hear in the chat. I know there's a whole bunch of places that you can put things, but the chat with everyone checked, we'd love to hear what your role is, where you are in the world. Great Lakes MHTTC is that Midwest region in South Dakota. We're not in Great Lakes MHTTC. Some of you might be in that area or outside. We'd love to hear where you are. And we'd love to hear your perspective on what an engaged family looks like in whatever setting you work in. I'll read some of these answers out, and then we'll talk a little bit about engaged families and engaging with families. I see someone is a mental health consultant for schools in Southwest Michigan. I know I asked a whole bunch of questions, so it might take a second for you all to get things in the chat. Public health nurse, youth partner, school social worker, an engaged family is present. Okay, school-based therapists, therapist, peer support. Great. It sounds like we have a wide representation of folks who work in schools, who partner with schools. Okay, school-based mental health, SPED teacher. Fantastic. Wow. I'm impressed with the audience and wishing that the roles were reversed and I was learning from you all. Yeah. Amazing. Make sure that once you also pop your role in the chat, that you also share what an engaged family looks like in whatever your setting is.
That must be a difficult question to answer.
All right. Well, I guess while you are thinking about that, if you decide to put it in the chat, we'd love to hear your perspectives, attending events, checking progress book, answering phones. Great. Lisa and I chatted a little bit about what the families who participate in treatment, have input, are heard. Great. They attend IEP meetings, they provide input. Absolutely. So we generated some ideas from our experiences about what sort of folks in schools, folks who work with families might commonly say. I'm seeing some of these in the chat, and we hear these quite commonly. These are the types of ways that we see engaged families. So one of the things that we expected you all would say that are really commonly held beliefs about engaged families is that they attend school events, is that they agree with school decisions, and is that they participate in conferences and meetings. These certainly are ways that families can be engaged. And I'm going to invite Lisa now to share some perspectives on the diverse ways that families might be engaged in the school setting.
When Miranda and I were first talking about this, as a parent and here at a parent center, and I've been doing this work with families daily and professionals serving them for 16 years. The concept of engaged families kind of indicates that the school gets to be the decider and gets to, decide what is the engaged family and how that looks. And we often see this by they determine if they attend school events and meetings and they sign the paperwork and they're, responsive to our request, then they're engaged, right? And so the school gets to be the decider. And I told Miranda that I often am in meetings with professionals, and I can't help but think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that in the same meeting, they will complain about families who are not engaged, lament, admire the problem. They will admire the problem of unengaged families, and they will also admire the problem of two engaged families, helicopter families. And the thing is, any one professional can have a different idea of what constitutes too much or too little, right? So families are kind of in a no-win situation in terms of being an engaged family. At the Parent Center, we much prefer the title or the concept of family partnership, right? When we're actually not doing two families, but we're working with families to develop what I think we're all here for, better outcomes, best outcomes for kids. And so I was doing a little research, which shows that the most powerful family engagement that promotes student learning is actually outside of the school, has nothing to do with the school. And I saw one of our participants today said, meals with the family, communications with the family. So it's around the dinner table, it's in the car, it's in those extracurricular activities. Is homework completed or a start on it? Or if it's not completed, a note that says, hey, we could not make this happen today. It was just too crazy. Because you know what? Sometimes that happens. Are they reading to their child? Are they talking about current events with their child? Are their kids in school? So let's, are they involved again in those extracurricular activities, which we know make all the difference in engaging kids? Because we're not talking about engagement with school. We are talking about families engaged with their kids' learning and educational progress. And that can change over time as well. And so I know in the early years, there are many opportunities for families to be engaged. And I have been on PTAs and PTOs and site councils and all kinds of things as a parent myself and in leadership roles. And so in elementary school, there's the bake sale and the sales of this and come to meetings and the science fair and many, many opportunities. And then in middle school, suddenly families were coming to me saying, how can I be involved and volunteer in the classroom? And the middle school teachers who I'm working with say, well, we want kids to do it themselves. We want them to be independent and build these skills. So don't call us parents, we will call you when we need, right? And so it changed. And then suddenly we want them again, right? And I work in the special ed field. So we have this transition to adulthood for youth 14, 15 and above to prepare for adulthood. And suddenly we're lamenting again about parents are not engaged. So I would say, look at the structure of your school and your setting and what you're asking and the opportunities that you are providing for families to allow them to be engaged with their students' learning and allow them to be engaged in the system, your school system, that supports opportunities to engage those families. So anything else you want to share, Miranda, or?
I think you did a great job capturing, we really just want to sort of bring home the message that school engagement and family engagement and partnering with families should not only be on school's terms, it should be authentic and genuine and bring into the fold the values and perspectives and needs of individual families. On the coming slides, we're going to talk a little bit more about what this might actually look like, right? It's easy to say you ought to partner with families. It's a lot harder to say what that looks like or what you can do. We know that there are a lot of things that maybe get in the way or make it difficult for for folks working in schools or working with youth to partner meaningfully with families. And so we have just a few here kind of key takeaways about how to effectively communicate. We'll talk on the next couple of slides about factors that discourage and encourage family engagement and the things that you can really do boots on the ground in your day-to-day to meaningfully partner with families. So I'm going to read through some of these and Lisa's going to provide a few examples of each of a few of these and the things that they really might look like, and the ways that they might happen well, and the ways that these could be maybe implemented in a legalistic way, but not in a way that actually authentically brings families into the fold. So our first is to communicate early and often. The really important thing that I'll let Lisa touch on here is that we want to make sure that we're communicating strengths and that we're communicating positives. Lisa, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. Well, and so what happens is families are hesitant to answer the phone or respond to you because sometimes all they hear is a negative, right? The most powerful reinforcer is intermittent positive reinforcement is the most powerful way to shape behavior. And many times we focus on the negatives and we only communicate. Now, for these things here, this is what I tell families as well. I train families and I train professionals. Communicate early and often, including about positive things. Your student was just so kind and helpful today to another student. Or, man, they had a great day today. I just want to express that, right? Because that's also shaping and reinforcing the behavior of kids. Nothing is more powerful than that third party recognition of a kid, right? So build relationships about positive things with families early and often, because if difficulties arise, you have a strong bridge, and that relationship you have built of trust and respect and reciprocal information sharing can be very, very helpful. 65% of communication is nonverbal, including in our written communication, which is nonverbal. So what is the tone? What is the length? I have seen notes home that are just a laundry list of complaints about what the child is doing wrong, which lets me know that that's the focus. We're trying to list everything. And so, while yes, the reality is we have students who struggle, and we need to work with families to figure out how to support kids, because families don't have magical strings on their kids. It's almost like, they did all this, fix their behavior before you send them back to school. And truly, that's not in our control, right? Behavior many times is situational. And we know kids can do great in particular settings, even particular classrooms, and at home, but not in other settings. So what can we do to make sure that, our tone and our nonverbal are neutral, even hopefully warm and respectful, to say, Johnny seems to be really struggling today. Is there something going on at home that might help me understand what's going on? Here is what I am seeing. And what I am seeing needs to be neutral, not they're naughty, they were talking back. That is subjective. But what actually is happening here objectively? What are you seeing and hearing? To be able to really work with a family and listen for what might be going on, or partner with families to say, all right, this is what's going on. This is what I'm thinking of trying here. What are you thinking? And home can support that, right? But home can't necessarily change that behavior, right? What are we doing about meeting the family's bigger needs? Because behavior at school may be, quite frankly, at the bottom of the list. If they have housing insecurity, if they have safety issues, if they have food insecurity. And we know that post-pandemic, families are struggling. And sometimes families we may not perceive might have struggles, may actually have significant needs that are beyond the radar. So what can we do to meet with a family and see, are there other things going on that we can help get you connected to really partner with a family to support their needs, because then they're going to have more bandwidth and be more available to support those child's educational needs.
And I think, frequently, the things that I imagine, as a person who also works in schools, some things that are, tend to run through my head as we talk about these topics are just the things that get in the way, right? Thinking about the fact that this takes time that we don't have. I want to encourage you to think kind of on that sort of broad spectrum when we kind of that long-term investment when we think about working with families. In schools, we know that we tend to have a pretty reactive approach, right? We quick text family or call when there's a significant challenge or barrier that gets in the way. But what we know is that behavior, right, changes over time. Relationships are built through the tiny little back and forths over a long period of time. This investment and this communicating early and often doesn't mean, we're not suggesting that you have an hour-long meeting with every, family who has a kid in your classroom. Or, every, family all the time for an hour. This could be a quick text or a voice note. This could be something in Class Dojo if that's something you all use. It, of course, should also be something that parents are able to access, right? It shouldn't be only email, right? It should be the ways of communication, the forms of communication that fit the family's needs and can be these really brief, high leverage sort of little nuggets, like a breadcrumb trail that build over time to lead to trust that can really, help us get ahead of that reactive sort of trend in schools and help us to build over time and hopefully alleviate some of those more challenging barriers later. All right. When we think about factors that discourage family engagement, there are a whole bunch. The first couple I'll put up here are feeling unwelcome and perceptions of discrimination. Lisa has a couple things she wants to share here. So Lisa, I've wanted to pose these questions to you. So first, what historical and family considerations should folks in school settings make to sort of get in front of or understand these notions of feeling unwelcome or perceptions of discrimination?
Right now, we are seeing unprecedented civil discourse that is threatening and negative and targets families of color, individuals of color, individuals with different faith backgrounds, and it can be frightening, right? It can absolutely be frightening. And so we have to understand that perception is reality, and the fact that you are not like that, and that's not how you treat people. It's unfair, but families themselves may have school experience that were very negative. And their kids, either the kid in your classroom or other kids who've kind of gone before and been in other classes or other schools, they come to you with sometimes some very negative experiences. And you have to deal with that baggage. That's just how it is, right? And even though that might not be you and that might not be your school, you have that tough road to establishing trust and relationship with that family. And that is your job. You don't get a pass. It's unfair. It stinks. I get that. But you are the professional, and that is why you are here today, right? And that is why you're doing this work. And so what can we do to really recognize that? And that, perception is reality. And so you may not agree with their perception, but that is their reality. And it's so powerful to be able to say, I am so sorry that you experienced that. I am so sorry that your children experienced that. What can we do to build relationship now and start working toward a better way forward? It's very powerful and really lets families know that you see and hear them and validate their experiences, but also that you want to get beyond that and you're willing to do the work.
Right. Although we want to build these individual relationships and partnerships with families, it's important to understand sort of the role of being a person who's an ambassador of a system, right? When we work for schools or when we work for organizations, there's a lot of baggage there, right? Schools historically and currently can be sites of oppression, right? Can be systems that uphold things that have very real and tangible impacts and harm experienced by those families with whom we work. Not honoring that and approaching relationship as just an individual would be to neglect a huge swath of information that we have about families and their interaction with schools, which affect their interactions with us as individuals. There are also some nuts and bolts, right? When we think about things like childcare, financial difficulties, transportation, and time and scheduling, these are all things that can certainly get in the way of a lot of the ways that we talked about families being engaged and seeing families as engaged. We've sort of the briefest of case examples that I want Lisa to help us think through. So I want to think about the day-to-day factors that could discourage participation or engagement with families. So let's pretend we want to schedule a meeting with families for 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, because that's the time that works best for most of the school-based team. Lisa, can you walk us through kind of what that would mean for a family?
Well, and if you've met one family, you've met one family, right? So families who are professionals, you know, are going to have paid time off. They're going to have flexibility in their schedule. They're, you know, they may be able to make that work. They're going to be positioned to make that work, right? If they have other kids and they have childcare set up or after school care, and they don't have to worry about those other kids, yeah, they're primed to go. But for the rest of the families, right? Do they have a job that even allows time off or pays time off? Do they have a job that allows for flexing their schedule? We have agricultural processing facilities that employ a lot of people here in South Dakota. And I can tell you, those systems are not flexible. And families are threatened with, you lose your job if you call in one more time, or if you have to leave early one more time. And then for families who do have other kids, all right, what are they supposed to do with those other kids? We have a childcare crisis in South Dakota, just like you do in your state, right? And so, you know, do you have the funds for those extra childcare hours? Do you have someone to care for your kid? Do you actually have transportation to make it to the school? Maybe you have transportation. Do you have gas money, right? If you have to decide between gas to work or gas to school, guess what's going to win out? It's going to be gas to work, right? And if you are feeling unwelcome and feeling like no one's listening to you anyway, then why are you going to show up to put yourself through that? And so I work with families, we work with families here across the spectrum regarding documentation and legal status and language and religion and economic supports and social supports. And each family is unique in what they bring to the table and whether they can make a simple 3:15 schedule work, right? And so there again, you really have to individualize what will work for the family and engage with them about what is the time that works for you.
So now as we think about those different ways that families may, you know, bring to the table things, you know, that make them hesitant or reluctant or unable to engage with the school sort of on school grounds as scheduled by the school. It's important that we think about the different ways that this can look, right? About the ways that we can encourage family engagement. This first set of things is procedural, right? These are like the nuts and bolts of like a task that you can complete, a way that you can engage, that's pretty tangible, that can support and facilitate and foster that enhanced family engagement. So the first is that school provides valuable resources. Like Lisa said, there can be a lot of sacrifices that a family makes in just showing up at that table. And if the school is perceived as being a valuable place, that parent input will be respected and that school will give credible information that's helpful and useful to the family, they're more likely to make those sacrifices if they're necessary. Of course, we hope that they won't have to make sacrifices and that we can work with them, but providing valuable resources can help families sort of be encouraged or have incentive, right, to figure things out, to show up at that table when we ask them to. Activities and clubs are another great way for us to encourage family engagement. When we have things that are not just asking them to come in and sign off on a decision that we've made, when we have ways that school becomes a center in the community, right, becomes a space where they're getting a lot of value through, their children being engaged, even parents being engaged, it can become a more meaningful and multifaceted relationship and a community built around the school rather than only this sort of site of education where families are kept at arm's length. And a couple other pieces that I'm going to let Lisa talk about are having someone either from inside or outside of the school who's seen as an advocate or liaison who's on their side can really help families feel comfortable and safe at that table. Additionally, families overwhelmingly feel better when they know what's going to happen. Lisa, I'll let you speak a little bit more to these.
So when families bring somebody along with them, generally those people are there to support them, to encourage them, to be on their side, to help them listen between the lines, right? There's a lot of that going on, and to support them. They're not generally there to make life miserable for you. I mean, that's not the reason families are inviting somebody. They feel overwhelmed, they feel intimidated, and they just want some support. And IDEA provides for that, and I hope your school provides for that. Don't make assumptions about why that they're there. Don't make assumptions that they're here to, be difficult or try to put pressure, because then you're setting yourself up for, all right, we've got our guns ready to go and they've got their guns ready to go. We can't focus on a child and work together as a team if we're already preparing to be at war with one another. And understanding the process, there's IDEA, there's 504, but there's also those preliminary steps, right? There's the TAT or the SAT teams, and everyone calls things different in different states. In South Dakota, we have teacher assistance teams, TAT, or student assistance teams, SAT, which are those low-level attempts to support a child who is struggling behaviorally, academically, PBIS, whatever you want to call it. But, we have those kinds of supports as well. And so, what can we do to support families and understand? I actually have added something into the chat that will be loaded about when there are advocates there. Advocate in parent center language, an advocate generally means someone who is paid to come in, but their role is not to sell you or threaten you on something. Their role is to build relationship, help families understand the process, maybe ask some clarifying questions. So I have provided in the chat some of those standard operating the standard operating procedures for advocates, so that you know that they are there to support schools and families, to support children to better outcomes, right? And to help understand what can be a very confusing process. And then we, and once is not enough. We can't do something one time in terms of engaging with families, outreaching to families, and be done. It is building relationship, reinforcing that relationship and trust again and again and again. What can we do? In South Dakota, we have 9 tribal reservations. We have communities where over 50% of the student body, English is their second language, that their families may be limited English proficient. And when we can provide supports to families for school events with big turnout, you know what it is, transportation is provided, a meal is provided, there's something there for families to go to release the burden on them. Sometimes childcare is provided so that families can be engaged with the school. We're providing supports that invite them in and recognize that there's more needs, right? Not all of us, are willing to throw our kids in the car, go through the drive-thru at McDonald's, eat on the way to the activity, and then show up and be fully engaged. We have cars, we have resources, we have means, we have know-how, we have time to make all those things happen, right? And I'm going to guess most of us on the call, tend to be more on that line, that we can fairly easily integrate that into the schedule. But that is not certainly all families.
Right. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I want to really reiterate this piece that advocates or parents bringing someone to the table with them, we really want to avoid thinking about that as a threat. I know in school teams that I've worked on, that's felt really intimidating, right? It's felt kind of scary. And I encourage you all to take this perspective that Lisa's helped me learn, of just thinking about the imbalance that parents are walking into, right? Frequently, our school-based teams have 5, 6 school-based personnel on them who are all experts in the process, right? Who know what's happening, and parents come in alone, without information if the school hasn't provided it, and having that advocate or liaison or support with them isn't something that's meant to threaten or be scary to the school. It's really to help the family feel empowered and have more information, which ultimately helps them be a better team member who's more able to engage with the process meaningfully, right? So these folks should be encouraged to participate, and we should feel like this is a benefit that we can get the parent in a more comfortable and empowered space as they join our team, right? As they work with us. So I know that advocates can kind of feel scary or feel litigious, and I encourage you to think about sort of how that turns into a more equal power, rather than giving parents more power, which might be what it feels like. When we as school tend to be the ones who hold more power in this process, it can feel uncomfortable for the playing field to be a little closer to level. And that's what's fair, and that's what we should have happening, right? That's what we should encourage, that families be an equal player, and not that we hold out all the power because that feels more comfortable to us. Some other sort of more nuts and bolts are ensuring transportation, that folks can get to a meeting, can show up on school grounds if that's what's going to be expected of them. We also want to provide ways that folks can partner outside of school hours. We know that for many folks, the times that they work are the exact times that their children are in school. Folks who are parents and work in schools know that this can be a barrier, right? Those of us who work in schools also feel this, right? It's difficult to not be able to schedule a doctor's appointment that's at a different time than when we work. The same is true for families when we ask them to engage in schools. So it can be helpful to provide ways to partner out of school hours. This, of course, doesn't mean that we're expecting folks who work in schools to become 24-hour school employees. It just means that we encourage you to be flexible, right? About, maybe one day a month you're available for later calls, right? Maybe there's a time that, you can encourage leaders at your school to, instead of having that sort of PD time where you get maybe a little break or planning, instead of having that at the end of the day, maybe have it a couple hours after the day and you can do it from home, right? We want this to be something that could work for both school employed folks and families. And so we encourage you to get creative about thinking about what it might look like to provide support outside of school hours in ways that also don't make you a 24-hour employee. Then lastly, personal invitations can be really critical. We want families not only to get sort of the letter that informs them that a meeting is going to happen, we want them to get that personal touch of hearing that someone cares that they're at the table and wants to hear from them. Lisa, I'll let you talk a little bit more about these nuts and bolts too.
Yeah. Well, and there again, all families are unique and different, and they need to be invited in. And that personal approach, we know, makes a difference. And you may have some people at the school who, for whatever reason, make connections with certain families. And you know what? You use that to your advantage. For some reason that they've made a connection, whether it's a classroom teacher or a support person, but that person can share their knowledge and use that relationship to the benefit of both the school and families. And so, this is where your team approach, your internal team approach, can kind of figure out for those families who are most reluctant or most unable to be at school, what has worked for you, And how can we replicate that? It's using the bright spots, right? It's finding those success stories and replicating that. And if you have a good strategy for the one family, that ends up probably being a good strategy that you can replicate for other families who are perceived as not being engaged at the school. And I have a little more to say, but I want to wait till we get to the next slide on that one.
All right, so some of these other pieces that I'll let Lisa take the lead with are relational, right? These are the things that we really feel more than we can document, right? And these are the things that families really notice and we really should be intentional about. We know that one meeting in the course of a school professionals day is one meeting, right? We might have 50 of these in a year. For families, this is the one opportunity that they get. It shouldn't be one, right? And when we have meetings, this is their child. It's much more impactful and important, and they're noticing things and keying into things that make this much more than just another meeting that they have. Lisa, take it away.
So in South Dakota, you may be surprised that we have actually communities with very high culturally different populations. And different cultures come in with different experiences, but also different expectations of what schools should do or what schools can do. And from families for other countries that come in, other countries, school is, you're not allowed to ask questions of the school. The school is the decider. And even things like medical care, if something happens at school, the school is responsible. And so we have to understand that cultural differences can be profoundly different. And how do we help understand what families expect from us? And how do we have those conversations and help families understand that here in the US or in our community, this is how our school works, and this is what we offer, and this is what we expect from families. And in a way that's positive and engaging, not like you need to do this, right? But helping them to learn what our expectations are. And so when families come in, are they greeted? Hi, we are so glad that you are here today. Welcome, welcome. Even if you have difficult conversations, you can be respectful and you can be welcoming and to say, you know what? Yes, our student, because usually it's difficulties with a student, typically, right? Yes, we are having some issues right now, and we want to come together and all of us think, because we're all smarter together, to figure out how we help this student be more successful. And we want to hear your information that we might not know about. We want to be inquisitive. We want to learn about what's behind the scenes, because there could be things going on. We may have a kid who's really disruptive. Well, there could be dad may have left, or mom may have left, or there could be illness in the family. We have to understand that there can be significant things going on in the family that might be unseen to us. And so when we reach out and are welcoming and let families know we're a safe landing spot to share so that we can support and help them, right? But ultimately to support and help their child or their children. And so what can we do to make sure families feel like we authentically care about them and care about their kids? Because when we care about their kids, that's really powerful, and families can sense that.
Great, thanks for sharing, Lisa. These next couple of slides, we're gonna, I think, try to go through pretty quickly or briefly. We're going to get into a little bit more of the procedural safeguards, right? There are things in place in laws and regulations, right, that ensure that we must have parents participate. And we want to go over sort of a little bit of these in terms of both sharing the letter of the law, right, what you must do to be compliant, and then also sharing perspectives about how to ensure that compliance, but also mirror the spirit of the law in addition to the letter of the law. So I'll kind of breeze through this and encourage you to read this at length, right? IDEA is very important legislation for folks who work in schools to be familiar with. And one of the things that's ensured under IDEA is parent participation. We see that the agency, the school, right, must take steps when special education is a consideration, is something that's happening for a child, that one or both parents of a child are present, are part of the IEP meeting, and are afforded the opportunity to participate. Now, the law says that means we must notify parents of the meeting early enough to ensure that they will have an opportunity to attend, and then says that we should schedule the meeting, we must schedule, rather, the meeting at a mutually agreed on time and place. Lisa, I'll let you speak briefly on the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law there.
Well, and it says and. So I was telling Miranda, I wish that they would have put 2 as number 1, and then notifying parents second, because you got to schedule before you notify, right? And it could be easy to say, all right, well, we notified them, check that off the list, they had plenty of opportunity. But many times notifying is a checking off the list, right? And we're not really working with families to schedule a meeting at a time and place that works for them. And I will tell you, I recognize the difficulties of the hours of the school day and making demands on staff, and school having to get all the players that need to be at I understand the challenges and the difficulties. That said, 1 and 2 still apply, right? It needs to be mutually agreed upon, and families need to be notified in enough time to ensure that they can attend. And so, are you meeting both the intent and the letter of the law in scheduling those meetings? Did I hit what you wanted there, Miranda?
Perfect. We're also required to inform parents, right? When we send this invite, when we plan the meeting, when we provide space for families to attend at a time that works for them, we also need to be sharing with them what the purpose of the meeting is, right? Folks who don't work in schools don't know what an IEP meeting is, don't know the processes there. And so it's our responsibility to not only indicate who's going to be at the meeting, the location of the meeting, also to indicate the purpose of the meeting, what's going to happen there, and what the parents' real role is at that table. We also need to ensure their participation. So this, leaves space for if there's a situation where a parent doesn't come to the meeting or can't come to the meeting. We encourage this to be really that last resort, and not as there's an easy way to get out of parents participating. But it is possible, right, that we can be creative to ensure parent participation, including things like phone calls. We can conduct a meeting technically without parent attendance if we're unable to get them to attend. This doesn't mean that we should, have this as the goal, because it'll be simpler. And I'll let Lisa speak a little bit to how can we be creative when participation seems impossible.
And again, families have, limited, our most at-risk families probably have the least amount of flexibility in their work or job schedules, right? And probably also have the least access to transportation resources, right? And it's easy to say, oh, you can just take the bus. Well, anyone that has to take the bus, especially in a state like South Dakota, where we don't have a large population, taking the bus means, 3 hours out of your day, because, it may be, 30, we don't have buses running every 10 minutes like some larger communities. And so what we're asking of families may not be doable, but we have found through COVID that there's lots of different ways, and IDEA allows for different ways for parents to participate. They can call in on their phone. I think most people are experienced with some kind of video technology at this point, right? What else can we do? Can they do it over their lunch break or their coffee break or something at work that makes it doable? To be relentless in committing to families, we want you to participate, because what you have to say and what you know about your student is unique and really important. So what can we do to make it work for you? Let's get this figured out.
All right, then the final pieces of the IDEA safeguards are that we should use interpreters if relevant, right? If a family speaks a language other than English, and then we should provide a parent copy of the child's IEP. This means, as Lisa has provided a resource in the chat that Rebecca shared, it's important that this information not just be a copy of the IEP, but be a copy that the parent can understand, right? So it should be translated if that's something that's a relevant need for the family.
Right. So I did check on OCR because it talks about, language access for families. And I want, because I work very closely with many families whose English is not their first language, really understanding English takes several years. And especially when we're talking complex things like, school issues and IEP issues and goals, that may be beyond the typical conversation, right? And so do not use their children to be the interpreter. We are disrupting the other children. We are setting families up for, I'd say don't do it. It's not a good practice. It disrupts, and actually it can set up for difficulties and complexities because we're making assumptions that, a child is able to understand and translate. So please do not use. Now, I live in a state where there may be 0 interpreters for a family, and we must rely on an older child of theirs to do. There are times when we have to do that, but if we have an option, let's make sure that we are really encouraging interpreters. And I know I work with families who say, I don't need an interpreter. And I will say, you know what, I need an interpreter because I have to be sure I'm understanding you. Because it's very important that I understand what you are communicating to me. So it's important for me to have an interpreter. And that is one way I have kind of worked around families who really need it, because I know you work with families who really should have an interpreter because that they're not able to understand at the level that allows them to be a good partner. I also want to, it was OCR, hopefully, and you will have that in the handout, an OCR guidance that talks about when we are talking about the notice and we are talking about the IEP and we are talking about evaluations and all of those, language access should be included with that documentation. If families can't access the written notice, then they've not really received it, have they? Right? So what are we doing to ensure that the materials we send to families are accessible to them via the language that they read? Recognizing again the reality that some families, including families who are born and raised here, may not be literate in language, may themselves have dyslexia or other disabilities that make the written word inaccessible to them. And we have to see if we can tease that out and find out a way to do that. And I know in my work, I will ask families, I can send written materials, but is there another way that would be better for you to get that? Do you need me to send you a video? Do we need to meet in person to have a conversation? Because not all families have the same access to the written word that I'm going to guess all of us on the call today do.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll need to breeze through some of these upcoming slides because we're running short on time. I'm gonna send it over to Lisa to briefly summarize this, where I think really our purpose here is saying that under IDEA, this is an ongoing process and families should be involved at all times. Right?
And and this is a good process for anyone to use for any problem, whether it's school attendance issues, whether it's behavioral issues, where it's connecting with the family issues. Use the expertise of your school staff to kind of get together, review what's going on, what works and what doesn't work, what do you need to reconsider and redo a little bit differently.
Thanks. Then I'll talk briefly about consent. We talked a little bit about making sure that families understand what we're giving them. It's also important when we're communicating early and often that families be informed about what's happening with their children, and that they're our partner in that process. So this means that even when we're getting passive consent, right, families are presumed to consent to procedures, should still be informed. They should still know what's happening. And then we need a informed consent that is active with right signatures and verbal consent for anything that we're actively doing that is individual to a particular child. It's important that as we're obtaining consent, we engage early, we give time for decision-making, and that we empower parents as part of our decision-making team, not only kind of hand them a paper to sign after a decision has been made.
And we never want a family to receive an informed consent and it's a surprise, right?
Right.
We want to include them much earlier than that informed consent being delivered.
Absolutely. We talked through some of these as we were talking about factors that discourage and encourage family engagement. So some of the common barriers, I'll go through a couple and then I'll pop a couple over to Lisa. First are staffing and funding shortages, lack of time, and lack of clarity around what should be communicated and when. We encourage you, right, to find ways that fit creatively into what you're already doing as ways to establish family school partnerships. So this could be things like, if you're using PBIS, use one of the apps like Class Dojo, right, that can send prompts out to families to establish connections over the longer term. Of course, that, blanket communication isn't enough. So we should try to do individualized, positive things that are related to each kid. But we encourage you to try to be creative about sort of what can give in terms of these things. And then Lisa, I'll pop it over to you for that desire to avoid burdening families.
And yes, families have a lot going on. They may be struggling, but ultimately they are their child's decision maker. And so better to give the family, don't make decisions and choices for a family. That is their decision to make. And so while we appreciate that, we also are removing from families the chance to be engaged meaningfully in their child's education.
Thanks. All right. So we now have some evidence-based interventions or procedures that you can use in school. I'm just going to give for these resources. We provide some detail in these slides and also detail in a resource that you'll receive that has links and ways that you can engage in these things further. So I'll just provide kind of like a one-sentence overview with each of these slides. So Teachers and Parents as Partners is an evidence-based intervention for individual child problem solving that walks through the behavioral consultation framework and really values and takes into consideration family partnership and families as an equal member of the team. Family Checkup is this more systems level intervention that's evidence-based and helps us bring in every family in a school community to have a meeting once a year, very briefly, that says, hey, how are you doing as a family and what do you need? There's a lot of resources linked on your resource guide related to Family Checkup and Teachers and Parents as Partners. And I'll have Lisa give kind of that high level overview of some of the resources that you as professionals and that families can access as you're partnering together.
And so we have national centers available to you as professionals, support you in the important work that you're doing, including ways to partner with families. And so all of this information is going to be provided. These are all excellent, credible resources you can be confident using. We have Cadre, we have NEFSTAC, we have what's next? The statewide family engagement centers. Even if you don't have one in your state, most of the information is publicly available, so you can get webinars and resources for both families and professionals to help you in this important work. We have PTIs are next. Let me see. We have PTIs. I work for a parent training information center funded by OSEP, Office of Special Ed Programs. Every state has at least one. Again, you can go here, and we are here to help you as professionals partner with families because it improves outcomes for kids. We also have our network of family health information centers federally, which really broaden beyond those IDEA categories to everything and anything. And again, we are here to support professionals to help them work with families, ultimately to improve outcomes for kids. Yeah. And we want to thank you so much for your time and attention and your interest in this subject. And I want to thank Miranda for inviting me in today.
Thank you all for being here. Sorry we breezed through those resources, but hopefully you'll be able to revisit them on that resource list and in the slides so you can access them and tap into more ways to enhance your family partnership. Now that we're wrapped up, I'll pass it over to our great MHTTC hosts to give you information about the survey and next steps and where resources can be found after today's session.
Thank you so much, Miranda and Lisa. You guys were fantastic. And everyone on the call, I know I put so many resources and links in the chat. So please do not try to click all of them. We will be sending out a follow-up email along with, we will be posting the recording and the PowerPoint on our Great Lakes MHTTC website. Just a few reminders that at the end of the session, once we close out, you will be automatically redirected to a very brief survey. I also put the link in the chat for you guys if you would like to click that before. You only need to take it once. It allows us to continue to provide free trainings to you all, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. Certificates of attendance will be sent out to all who attended the session today in full. This may take up to 2 weeks. And then again, we will be emailing the presentation slides and handouts and all the great, wonderful resource links following today's presentation, along with it being posted to our Great Lakes MHTTC website. So thank you all so much for joining us. If you guys do have any questions for the trainers today, please reach out to the Great Lakes MHTTC folks, or reach out to Lisa or Dr. Miranda Zahn. We really appreciate you all being here, and thank you again, Miranda and Lisa, for all that you have done for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Stay warm if it's snowy by you, and we will hope to see you on a upcoming training. Bye all.